Hi, everyone. Welcome to our breakout session, Stuck in the Middle, How to Manage Up and Down. I'm Candace Thorson, Managing Editor at GovLoop. So what do you think of our opening keynotes and the wonderful virtual environment we've created for you today? If you came from the keynotes, you learned about the future of the government workforce from the head of OPM, and you've also learned about mastering how to master delivering unpleasant news to senior management, which is a difficult and sadly unnecessary skill for leaders. So I know I'm looking forward to the rest of the summit, and I hope you are as well. But to get to our session now, middle managers, comprise the vast majority of government supervisors, and they have a really tough job. They have to do what their teams need while also executing on whatever their direct supervisors want. So in our time today, some really wonderful government experts are going to talk to us about how you can strike a balance between those two imperatives while remaining true to yourself and staying sane. I do have a few housekeeping things I need to run through. I think you probably know the drill by now, but if you're on Twitter, we'd love to know what you learned. So please use the hashtag NextGenGov to share your takeaways. We do have resources for you to download, so look for them on the right side of your console. And we have closed captioning. So if you want to access that feature, just look for the icon at the bottom right-hand side of your media player. We obviously don't want you to have technical problems, but if you do, that's okay. Just send us a message in the Q&A tab, and my colleague Julia will get your questions answered. You also can use the Q&A portal to ask questions of our experts. So drop them in whenever you have them, and we'll get to them in the second half of our time today. We do have an open chat available for you also. So if you want to interact with other attendees, just click on the blue group chat button in the middle panel of your screen. And don't worry if you miss anything about this session or anything in the virtual summit, because tomorrow morning we'll email you a link to the entire event. My last bit of housekeeping, we are giving out 1 CPE credit for your participation today. So be sure to take all the polls, participate in the entire session, and then fill out the post-event evaluation form. You can find that form either in the resource module on the console here, or you can go back to the resource center in the main environment. And tomorrow we'll email you directly your CPEs once we confirm you've met all the requirements. So now that that's all out of the way, I want to introduce our speakers. We have Alex Tremble. He is a career and culture coach at GPS Leadership Solutions, and he's the host of the Executive Appeal podcast. Alex is an award-winning speaker, author, and leadership expert who has more than a decade of experience coaching and advising some of the nation's most senior government leaders. We have Dr. Teresa Horn. She is the director of the Office of Diversity and Equal Opportunity of the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency. That is quite a title. She leads teams supporting approximately 14,000 federal employees and contractors, and that means she coordinates and manages day-to-day operations and the strategic vision of the office. And we have Ben Baldwin, who is the Youth Partnership Program Fund Manager for the National Park Service Youth Program Division. He coordinates several service-wide programs and has really focused his career on creatively working in bureaucracies, local, state, and federal. So we have a one poll question. I'm going to throw that up right now just so we get a sense of where people in our audience are in their careers. So the question is, are you a middle manager? Yes, no, and no, but I aspire to be. So we'll give everybody a minute to answer that. And while they're doing that, I just want to dive in and ask everybody the first question. So the session is really about those in middle management positions, people who need to manage up and down. So I just wanted to define the terms beforehand. So Alex, could you explain to me or to everybody what managing up actually means?
Actually, I thought we were going to kick it off with what's a middle manager? Because in my mind, unless you are, maybe Elon Musk, I think everyone who's managed, who has someone who's working above them and someone quote unquote below, not in the negative derogatory term, is a quote unquote middle manager. It means that you have someone that you need to help reach their goals. And I say that because a lot of the times the person who is above you, we like to see them as leadership or senior level leaders and so on and so forth. You know what they also are? They're human. And sometimes they don't understand and they don't know when they're actually getting in the way of their own goals. And so having someone who's external, someone who's apart from them, who has the trust and respect of this person to be able to help them navigate some of their own possibly bad decisions. We'll just call it, it's a safe place. Help them navigate some of their own bad decisions and elevate those things that they can those skills they can leverage and lean into. I think that what's effective managing up really truly is.
And I'll
Ben.
piggyback on that too, if I
Oh,
could.
sure.
I think it means really understanding relationship tactics, right, with leaders. So having that situational awareness, when to bring things up, who to bring it to, while understanding the underlying relationships, right, and the power dynamics and the influential people. And so, many times influence wins out over power. And so we may think someone's in charge, but really understanding that's what managing up means to me, is having a full situational awareness of the entire organization and the leaders that are a part of it and how to get things done.
And Ben, what are your thoughts on that as far as managing up or managing down? Like, how is managing up different from managing down?
Sure. Well, first, I just want to make a comment about the title. We call it stuck in the middle, but I actually believe it's a leverage point. I think it's one of the great positions of effective change and effective progress in an organization. And I look at it as an opportunity versus being stuck. I think that's an important distinction I wanted to make. But I want to follow Dr. Horn in situational awareness. So managing up for me is situational awareness, no surprises. You don't want to embarrass your supervisor up the chain. And then creating value. And that sometimes is hard, but understanding what management and supervisors need, learning how to ask the easy yes to get your team where they need to be, how to fully embrace your responsibility, understanding you don't have some authority going up, but a lot of responsibility, and then ultimately anticipating a lot of needs and making your supervisory chain above you successful by and countering that by sharing risk and workload challenges so that they can make appropriate decisions.
Yeah, that's great. And what is, as far as like managing down, what should our audience know about that?
Managing down, are you asking me?
Or Alex or Teresa, with whoever?
We'll pass it back to Alex.
Okay.
Oh, Ben's just trying to make a liar out of me. I told everyone before we started Ben was going to monopolize all the time. Now he's just intentionally throwing it my way. Honestly, I hope that I can take this conversation in a slightly different direction. I feel like, so I do a lot of culture work, as both Ben and Dr. Horn does as well. And if you look on social media, if you look in research articles, what is everyone focused on? We've been really focused on for a while, which is the Great Resignation, right? The Great Re-engagement. That means that a lot of our energy has really been geared towards how managers should better serve their employees. There's actually a whole thing, right? Servant leadership. What I find to be interesting is that I think that in this, I love to hear the ideas and thoughts from my panelists. I feel like the pendulum is swinged in almost an unhealthy way, because I consistently have been seeing recently a lot of managers needing to provide value to their staff, employees, to engage them, to keep them employed retention rates don't go down. But I've also seen an increase of individuals who don't necessarily care so much to provide that value to their managers, who they see managers as the leadership or the executive team or management, and they don't see them as people. And so what I've been seeing a lot recently, and I've been saying this consistently, like, supervision is hard. People don't like to say it, but it is, because you're navigating all these relationships, both on the top and on the lower end. And recently, I've been talking to so many managers who just feel almost beat up because they're doing everything they can to engage their staff, but it doesn't seem to ever be enough. And so I love to hear my fellow panelists, like, what are your thoughts? What are you hearing out there?
Yeah, I will say that I've heard some similar things, because I do feel like managing down is truly, distinctly different, because I think it ties to sharing of information and motivation. So motivating the team or an individual to achieve a goal, right? And so it requires, like you were saying, humanity and empathy to be able to do that, right? So how you do that differs from person to person or team to team, right? What motivates one person will not motivate another. And that's where it takes that empathy, that humanity to stop and really show who you are and learn who the person is as an individual. And so I think also the culture of a team tells you what works, right? So some teams, they enjoy the public accolades, right? While others enjoy the monetary part of the house, right? So the thought process, I think, is different for managers. When you're thinking about managing up, there's a lot of situational awareness, there's a lot of political savvy, right? But when you're thinking about managing down, you're looking at it from the humanity and empathy lens. And so that's a different thought process that managers have to have, even on the daily basis with dealing with their supervisors and then turning around and dealing with their employees.
Yeah, and I'll chime in there that first, I think it's just managing, right? You have a team. I don't know if it's down because you are part of that team. You are integral to their success and you're responsible for their performance. And I said with managing up, a big part of that is creating value. And to build off both the other panelists, I think that creating value also goes to the rest of your team. As Alex was mentioning, how do you create value? Why would they want to participate? Through professional development or understanding their motivation. A big piece for me is developing your team identity. What are your team values? What is your team purpose? How do you have some identity in a bigger organization, which is always challenging in a bureaucracy? Because you don't all play the same role or do the same things. There's very specialized tasks and responsibilities, and understanding and having a team identity that can motivate and bring you together. And I'll preface this, or I'll couch this in that I've always been lucky to have smaller teams. So I know this is harder to do as the size of your supervisory chain grows, but I've been fortunate to have smaller teams where we could really create that culture and value and create a place where people wanted to participate. You're on mute.
I just said profound things you didn't hear. I said that I love the idea of having a team identity that you stand out, because it's like it's culture building. You know, you bond together. I never thought about that. So, what kinds of things do you do to try and get your team to feel that way? Like, are there things that ways you should communicate with them that are healthy, you know, or things you should avoid doing to try and build connections with your team? In particular, anyone can jump in and answer.
Yeah, I'll jump in just to mix up the order. And I'll do this from a place where I really messed up. One of my first middle management positions where I thought the way to connect with team was to criticize up. So I often shared negative opinions and why the objective wasn't good and my interpretation of what the direction was coming with limited knowledge, right? And that middle management position is often challenging because you don't have full knowledge of the decisions or the objectives. You only have partial knowledge, and it took me a while to get around that. So, sharing appropriately without that interpretation or negative opinion is really hard to do, but really essential that you're not influencing or tainting your team towards a new objective before it even has a chance to land and understand where it goes. So really trying to share information in a way that helps create that context and then helps connect the team to how they are affected by it and how they can influence it.
Yeah. If that's okay, I want to just kind of jump on what Ben was talking about and say the interesting thing about men of management in regards to that not having the full picture. You also have more of a full picture than what your team generally has, because there's generally things that may be happening, may not be happening, some difficulty what's going on in the organization, but it's not your place, or you don't have it's not the okay to share that information just yet. So again, this talks about that frustration as a middle management where you're like, oh my God, if everyone just knew everything I knew, like they completely understand. But you can't share that, right? So that's why in this instance, it really comes down to trust. You have to create an environment within your team that lets everyone know that, look, I'm going to be transparent with you. Transparent doesn't mean that I can share. I'm going to share everything with you, but it does mean that I can tell you as much as I can. And I'll tell you that there are things that I also cannot share with you at this time. But that trust happens over a period of time. And unfortunately, it takes, it takes a lot of time, like building a domino trail, right? It takes a lot of time to build that domino trail, but you knock one over and it's done, right? So it takes a lot of time to build that trust within your organization, within your team. But one small thing can knock that trust down. And this is why I think, again, this is why leadership and supervision is hard. Again, I don't say that to mean that you shouldn't do it, because we need it. And we all benefit from having great leaders who do a phenomenal job of managing up and down. But I also just want to say, and I'll be quiet on this, is that we need to realize what Dr. Teresa was talking about. This is a human position. And it also means that you have to realize and remember that you too are human. So you need to also respect your time, respect your energy. If you're getting beat up a lot, like, you may need to take some time to yourself. You may need to find a coach. You need to talk to someone to help you through a situation. But I've spoken to, unfortunately, too many middle managers who believe that, hey, I'm the manager, so it's my job to get beat up. And it's okay that my team is treating me like this. And it's not. You're a person too, and you deserve the same level of respect and consideration.
Alex, I think you're spot on. I will just say, to really keep in mind to share more than just the objective, right? So, what is the expectation? What is the time frame? How will check-ins go? And sometimes as managers, we get so caught up in delegating that we forget the coaching piece. And so you brought up coaching, and it was like ding, ding, ding. And we can drop things in people's laps when they know exactly what they're doing, right? But for new projects or innovative ideas or new things that are coming down the pipeline that they've never done before, it takes a lot more information, right? And consistent check-in to ensure that the team or the person feels confident and secure in the path that they're taking to hit the goal, right? And so since Ben was very transparent and shared where he went wrong, I'm going to tell you where I went wrong as a manager too. And I will say, avoid leaning on your best and your brightest for everything, right? As managers, we want things to get out. We want it to be done right the first time. We want to move on to the next task. And a lot of times we communicate things directly to that best and brightest, our golden star person. And what that does is it hurts the team, right? And it hurts the best and the brightest, because it inadvertently, I think, excludes those who are willing to try and want to do better and want to be at the top, while at the same time it burns out the person who is always continuing to save the team at a short moment's notice. So don't do that. I did that, and I burned out my person, and they ended up leaving me. And then I was, stuck there with having to train everyone now, versus really taking the time to train them through the process and giving them grace to make mistakes and coaching, right? That was where I was trying to get out of my job, which was coaching people and motivating them and guiding them. And so as a manager, that's your job. You can't just say, hey, I'm going to take the easy route and give it to this person. You really have to take the time to coach others, give grace for mistakes, and then teach and train and educate as you go.
I want to jump in and share now where I made a mistake, because I love the idea of talking about mistakes, because as leaders, we don't always talk about that, and people think, oh, they're so perfect. I'm getting mistakes wrong. I must not be as good as Dr. Teresa and Ben and so on and so forth. So I want to share mine. I remember there's a young lady who I was just she worked 2 levels under me, and she told me, Alex, I'm super flexible, I'm super adaptable, don't worry about it, I'm just like you, like I'm super laissez-faire. I never get stressed out about stuff. It takes a lot to get me where I'm like, okay, we need to really figure this out. I just roll with the punches. And she was telling me these things, and I'm like, okay, cool. And I would share information with her. I was trying to mentor her. I was sharing with her political stuff. Hey, this person doesn't like this, or this person. Like, I'm really trying to grow her and mentor her. Turns out, She was saying that to me because I was the executive. I was the male in charge. And she felt that she needed to be that iron person, right? Unfazable. Turns out everything I was sharing with her was freaking her out. It was stressing her out. She needed more time to process things. Where I'm just sharing changes. We're going to change this, we're going to change it. And she needed time to process. And so I share this to say, as managers, we have to be very intentional with asking our staff how they want to best communicate, but also understand that there are other, fair or not, there are other dynamics at play. So even if they do tell you, hey, yeah, share this stuff with me, you have to be very cognizant and pay attention to see how they really operating. Because once I finally figured out, oh, I'm like stressing her out by telling this stuff. Now I can adapt how I behaved. And so I think that's really important. So I just want to share that mess on my side.
I actually have a question, because before GovLoop, I was a middle manager, actually. And there were times where my senior leader would want things done that I thought were just totally ridiculous. And I often would try to negotiate, basically, and turn her in the right direction. And sometimes it just didn't happen. And I know I had trouble sometimes because I had to translate, to the team, like what was supposed to happen. And when I didn't believe in it, and sometimes I thought it was just garbage, what I was being told to do, I had a really hard time being convincing, because I knew that I wasn't supposed to badmouth our boss. But at the same time, I didn't want people to think that I actually thought this was a good idea, because everybody knew it was a bad idea. And it was just, and honestly, I don't think I was always very good at it, because then the team would ask me questions and I'd have to defend it. And I'm like, well, I mean, I didn't do a good job. So what should I have done? I mean, because we're talking about mistakes. I mean, I did other things right, but in those cases, I know I didn't do well. When you know that you're screwing up, but you can't figure out how not to. Well, that was my. I'm being honest. So
yeah, I think that's a great question, and I'll just say that I've been in that similar situation. And what has worked for me, and this is probably like a link to what Ben was talking about, was, there are moments that you should be very transparent with your team, right? It doesn't have to be all the time. You don't have to badmouth leadership all the time. But if you really do feel like it's not the right thing to do, but we have to do it, say that. Right. I don't think, especially if they feel the same way and they're saying, ma'am, this doesn't sound right. And it's going to give us, it's going to take us 10 more hours to do it the way that they're telling us to do it when we can do it in 3 hours. And you're saying, yes, I know it would be faster if we did it our way, but we have to do it this way. Right. And so I think a lot of that is how you communicate it. Right. Which is to still err on the side of the mission. Right, versus your own personal feeling about it and saying, hey, we're really supporting a team or an effort or a project on this, and this is the way that they need it done. We know we could probably do it quicker because we're a rock star team, right? But we're a piece of a cog in a wheel. So let's play our position so that the entire project can be successful, right? So you still give it that sort of positive tonation, but at the same time, you're being very transparent and saying, yeah, team, I know that we could do this differently, faster, better, cheaper. But right now for this particular project, we're going to do it this way.
Yeah. Yeah.
People respect that,
I
think.
Alex or Ben, do you have any thoughts on that or any?
Yeah, I'll just follow up on it is, one thing that I started doing, and it doesn't happen when you're sharing the information, but yeah, trying to find context and trying to help them understand. Sometimes we have to do things and we don't fully understand why we're doing the best of our ability. But I started doing, in the Park Service, I know others do, after action reviews where you analyze what happened and what went right, what went wrong, and how you can change it for the future. It's not a blame situation, but analysis. And I started doing those with my team, especially for things we didn't like or we couldn't get behind, to understand why it was bothering us and what we could do differently, and then providing recommendations of after the fact to try to to manage up, to say, hey, for my team this would be better, understanding more of the whatever it was, but that empowered my team to know that they still had a voice and then being honest with them and saying, here's what I can share up, and knowing they might not take it, they might not want to hear it, but at least it gave us a way as a team to have a voice, right? To still do the job, to not complain, and know that we had an effective and professional tool on the back end that we could learn from it, learn how we could adjust what work we were doing in case something like that came again, if it was task oriented, and then provide feedback on, hey, if you would have done it this way, it would have saved you this much time, or it would have been better set up for the next task, or whatever it was. But that was something that helped us as a team come together and turn it from a negative, complaining, we're powerless, to how do we talk about it, change it, and then provide recommendations of how to improve it in the future, right? Because ultimately, I like to frame it, it's like a game. It's an ongoing game, right? It's round after round. It's not to win, it's to keep playing. So how do we make it work better next time? How do we always just look towards when this happens again? Because there's often, you feel powerless, right? Your team does. You get an order and it's just a mandate from up on high in the government somewhere, and you're like, this makes no sense whatsoever. But you have to create something that helps you have a context, put your mind in a place where you can still do your work.
I think part of it too is depending. I think part of it too is depending on the reputation of your leadership. Is this somebody who is generally crazy and comes up with weird ideas or something, or is this sort of an anomaly and normally they're on track? So we'll give them a little leeway because they made a bad decision in this case. I think that's got to be a factor too at times. People are more understanding.
I think that everyone, what's cool about this whole conference is that it's like government, right, across the board. And what's cool about it is that I think for the most part, all of you probably have dealt with this because every 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, whatever your government situation is, there's an election, right? Someone else is put in the power with a different agenda, different idea, and that may be different than the person before, right? That's not good or bad. It just is. And I think this is what you're bringing up is a very important point, which is, there are going to be times when you're being asked to implement something that is not in alignment with where you believe it should go. And me personally, how I get around it is just understanding first my role. My role is to implement the ideas that the person above me or whatever I'm reporting to has shared with me. Like that's my role. That's how I provide value. And I do it to the best extent possible. I interviewed a woman for on my Executive Hill podcast who she's worked for both Republican and Democratic administrations. And she said how she was able to do that is because she takes her personal self out of it. As long as it's not illegal, immoral, and ethical, she implements it to the best of her ability. And that allows her to, even whatever the directive is, you still generally have some wiggle room on how you implement it. And you look at that and say, you know what? Put my stamp on this. I was working in administration. I say this now because I'm not in government. I worked under both Obama's administration as well as Trump's administration. And there were things that were easy for me to communicate and make the case for during one administration. And in the other administration, it was very difficult for me to make that case. And I got into a situation where I was like, I told my supervisor at the time, I thought I can't do my job. I can't, with a straight face, communicate this information, that I support this and so on and so forth. And what he told me, which I've kept with me to today, use the facts. Just rely on the facts at that point. You don't need to add extra flowery language. You don't need to add all the extra fluff. If you truly don't agree with something, but you need to implement it, just rely on the facts. Hey, this directive's come down. We have this many, this flexibility. We can, this is how we can implement. This is the timeline. You can intentionally find flexibility. I think as long as you have an open mind, you can find flexibility for you to make good improvements to whatever comes your way. And the last thing I'll say on this also gets to a conversation about political savvy and or the other word being influence. The reality is that people are influenced through different ways. Some people are influenced through data. Some people are influenced through stories. Some people are influenced through loyalty and so on and so forth. There's a lot of different ways. And this is one of the things I teach on is the influence piece. But I can tell you, like, I've been in situations where I'm talking to scientists, I'm talking to researchers who are saying, this is the data. This is how we need to move forward, period. And then I say, That's right. But the reality of the situation is they will never go for this. So how do we move to a direction where we can get some of this good, right information and actually get it passed or get it implemented? Because if you present it the way you say you want to do it, it's not going to go anywhere right now. And what's more important, making progress or sticking to your morals? I mean, sticking to your research or what you believe is the best way.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think too, you touched on something when it's a new leadership and you don't really know the person that well, you don't know what that person really responds to. It's harder to try and convince them, or in my case, negotiate, because you just don't know what they respond to. So I think that's a really good point. Teresa or Ben, do you have anything to add to that? Or otherwise, I have another question that I can toss out there.
No.
Okay, cool. So one of the questions is like, how important is it to bring performance metrics, like how well your team is doing, up to senior leadership? Like, what's the best way to determine how well your team is doing, and what's the best way to let your leadership know? And I guess, why is that important to begin with? That's a lot in there, huh? So,
Yeah. So I will say this. I'm a huge proponent, for managers being advocates for their team, right? Because when you're doing the work, no one knows the work like your team does because they're actually doing it, right? And so expecting that senior leadership fully understands all the work, the time, the effort, how long it takes to do a particular task, they don't understand that. And so as managers, you're the person telling the story, right? And I think that's sometimes where we miss out on really, fully understanding it, because we go and we do a briefing packet with a bunch of data and we say, we hit these numbers, we're timely on this, here's the data. And they say, okay, great, you hit your metrics, right? But they don't know the backside of that data, which is my team worked until 10 o'clock at night, during the vaccine exemption process to make sure that we had these looked at, right? They're looking at the numbers and say, oh, we only have, X number of exemption requests. Great. They don't see, well, we processed 400 and it took this many for each one. And it was this many hours for my team. And, so you have to really, truly be that advocate for your team as a manager, to talk about how the work is done and what the impact to the employees are, and then translating that to the impact to the mission. And so that's I think one of the biggest roles as a manager that you can have, is to be an advocate for your team, to tell the good news story, to think of ways to put your team on the forefront, whether that is in your agency newsletter, whether that is in a senior leadership meeting, to say the names. Say the names of your team. Don't say my team, right? Or our department or our division, right? Say the names of the people who actually did the work, because that's what leaders will remember, is that an individual did it, right? Not just some team off in the ether, right? That they think is working steadily, in the background, but put the name to it and says, hey, Sue did 60 hours for us to make sure that this project came to fruition. And, we're really grateful for her efforts on this project. That puts that name there. It puts your team at the forefront as an individual that actually did some really great work. So that's what I would say is a huge tip I would give for managers, to be an advocate always.
And I'm gonna jump on that bandwagon and say that it's also up to you. Okay, we're talking about being stuck in the middle, or being in this middle manager position, not stuck, an opportunity. And you got to realize that what you think is important is not always important to someone else, right? I love the example. Like, if I were to offer everyone right now a Dragon Ball Z shirt, like, how many people would be excited? I would assume not everyone, but I would be excited. I love Dragon Ball Z. That doesn't matter. Thank you. Awesome. But that's the point. You need to figure out what is valuable to those people you're trying to influence. And so you need to understand, maybe providing some, and Ben knows this, like when we did documents in the National Park Service, if you just provide numbers, we employed 20,000 youth this year and da-da-da-da, that may do really well for promoting your team by certain people, but other people don't care. They want to hear stories. They want to see pictures. They want to see images, right? So you need to understand what it is whoever you're reporting up to, what do they want to see? How do you best communicate information to them? And and sometimes it doesn't need to be you. You can communicate it, but maybe you talk to that other person that your supervisor respects a great deal, and you tell that person about your program, because that person's going to go give your supervisor accolades. Oh my God, your team is doing so well. Isn't that a great plus, right? So again, this is all about being very intentional and strategic with how and where and when you share information. So I just wanted to thank you so much, Teresa, Dr. Horn, for putting these ideas out there, because I'm loving it too. Like McDonald's, I'm loving it.
That reminds me too. I used to work with state legislators, and they were wonderful, but they expected a lot sometimes. And I remember there was somebody out in the West Coast, and I'm based in New York, and he would say, "Oh, it's so wonderful. I can call the office at the end of the day, and somebody always answers the phone." Well, the end of the day for him was 7 p.m. for us. And we liked him a lot, but we didn't want to be there on a regular basis. So it got pointed out that, hey, Senator, we love talking to you too, but we would rather talk to you at 3 p.m. So, but it's stuff like that. And the miracle that you pull off one day suddenly becomes expected because, hey, you managed to do it, right? So unless you explain to people exactly how hard it was and you busted your butt and stayed and worked on the weekend, they don't necessarily know. And maybe it's not their fault. They just don't realize. So those are all really good, important points. Ben, did you have something to say? Because, Alex, he does talk a lot. So
seldom drops it. A couple things that I looked at like this, and it goes back to the team culture and values, is there are things you are required to do, either legally, statutory, or just have to happen. I was very clear with my team that we needed to identify those things that had to be done, right? You had to hit this goal, you had to do this report, you had to do this piece. But aligned with that was creating a culture of innovation and creativity and risk, right? What I found with folks is if they identified what they had to do, they sure got creative on how they could get that done better and more effective and faster. So then they could work on other projects that had value to them. And I encourage them to make big goals to try to improve the system. And that was a big part of my story, is not only did we get the required thing done, but my team figured out how to do it better or faster or more efficiently. And, oh yeah, by the way, we also did these other things and created that bigger opportunity for them that became professional development, but also became a motivation for them to be good at their job so they could then work on things that they thought were important. So creating a piece of their portfolio that was kind of their dream opportunity or the thing that they wanted to work on. And often it was something they were frustrated about, right? How do you fix this? Or how do we do this better? But making sure if you're not getting the job done that you're required to do, it doesn't matter how many other great things you accomplish, you have to get the job done first. But if you do it fast and efficiently and effectively, you have a whole bunch of space that you can do other things with. So that was that value for your team and creating that culture of doing it better, doing it more effectively, because when we do, we can do other things that we want to do. Goes back to that, the earlier conversation about getting something you don't want to do, but figuring out how to do it effectively and quickly so you can get back to what your team really values that aligns with your value of your organization.
That's a good point. We've been talking so much, I've been remiss to actually ask people the other poll questions. So we have one, if we want to pull up the slide for that, what is your major challenge as a middle manager? Is it competing priorities, changing priorities, getting teams on board with change, or getting buy-in from leadership, or do you just not have enough time to adequately manage your team? So we'll give everybody a minute to answer that, and then we'll pull up the results. But just, moving on, what would you say, what would you guys say are some of the most challenging aspects of, middle management for you guys? I mean, we've talked a lot about it, but I mean, if you were going to, what about competing priorities, for instance? How have you guys dealt with that? Is that a huge problem? I know we've sort of talked all about this stuff in general, but just to like be a little bit more specific.
For me, I will say out of the list that is here is really just the changing priorities, I think is one, because you know, when you think of priorities, that means something has to be done right away, right? And so when that shifts and your team is really focused on, hey, we got to get this done by tomorrow, and then it changes, the priority changes, and they say, oh, nope, that's bumped down to a level 3. Here's the new thing that I want your team to focus on that you need to do by tomorrow, right? And I think the frustration there, and it goes back to, again, what we were just talking about, is sharing the story, right, of the work and how it gets done. It stops people from sort of shifting your priorities at a moment's notice, because they now understand the work that is that it takes to you know, sort of give the product that they're looking for. And so for me, I really lean heavily on sort of when there is a change, you know, that communication strategy is a large part of sort of that change management piece, right, for me. So, you know, it's understanding how often I communicate the change, right? And that should be very consistent and often, as well as how I ask for feedback from the team, right? So it's not about me giving them a directive and saying, hey, do this by tomorrow. It's really listening to, you know, what are the hurdles? What are the risks? What are the challenges that you're going to have to meet this objective, right, by tomorrow? I'm listening for that. Because then we're talking as a team to say, how can I help you as your leader? How can I help you? Is it to ask for more time? Is it to get you better resources? Is it, you know, what are the stumbling blocks? And so it's a two-way street for communication and sharing information and listening to those challenges for me. So that's what I would say is my biggest sort of that list. Challenge is handling that change in priorities in a way that is seamless and gets people back motivated to do the new thing.
Interesting. Thank you. Competing priorities wins out. Ben and Alex, do you have any thoughts? We have some really good questions that are coming in from the audience that I'd like to ask too. But if you have any thoughts to follow up on what Teresa said.
I would just put in there the biggest challenge, I think, is just change in general, right? Not only priorities, but there's not a lot of stability in time or space with your team. And really, how do you manage that, right? The competing priorities, because those switch day to day, or, you know, you get a new congressperson and their priority is now this area instead of this area. And that became an issue in my team of how do you become resilient? How do you really understand what the purpose of your team is? And how do you develop that resilience of your team to bounce back to that change so it's not as impactful? I mean, I've seen teams get just devastated they were so focused on what they were doing, and then that priority changed, right? You know, COVID changed everything for so many people. Big plans just disappeared overnight, and saw people just, okay, I don't know what I'm going to do now. For my thing went away, whatever my thing was. So that resilience of your team to be able to deal with competition or change, I think, is a really important part of that middle management. And then I think, you know, let's jump into some questions, give time for Alex to answer this,
Sure.
but I think it'd be great to hear some questions.
Sure. One question, what happens when you know there's tension with an acting supervisor and a chief of operations? At times it feels like you get extra stress and anxiety that is not wanted. Does anybody have any thoughts?
Is this coming from the person? I guess I will answer it from the aspect of the person working for those individuals. And so I think when you have, when you have an acting supervisor, it's always tough because they're in a learning mode, right? They're trying to understand the landscape. They're trying to understand a new role that they weren't in before. And so there will probably be some areas where they may drop the ball, or you feel that they dropped the ball. This is an opportunity, I think, to talk to them and to help them understand the role, especially if you work in the division or department that this person is starting to lead. You know, they're going to need that insight from someone who has the institutional knowledge. So take that time to say, hey, you know, you're an acting supervisor. That tension may come from the chief of operations saying, I need this done tomorrow. And that acting supervisor is saying, well, wait a minute, I don't know the landscape. I don't know how long it takes my team to do what you're asking them to do. And so that institutional knowledge, I would say, is to really help that acting supervisor understand the way the work is done, talk to them about the challenges and the risks that are involved. And then hopefully with that, it's not a relationship thing, it's a work thing between the chief of operations and that acting supervisor. Because if it's a work thing, that can be overcome by the acting supervisor having, I think, more knowledge of the role, right? And so it can be very stressful, and the anxiety can be high in any change, right? Any change in role. But try your best if you're working for that individual to provide institutional knowledge.
Can I add on top of that? Just,
Sure.
I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure Teresa said earlier, grace. Just provide some grace. We are in a time like no other, and a lot of the work I've been doing recently actually is about providing spaces for leaders to talk about the challenges they've been having, managing up, managing down, because whether people believe or don't believe, we're in a fairly sensitive time where you can say something very unintentionally, and with the best intention, and if it comes off the wrong way or it's interpreted the wrong way, I hate to use this term, you'll be canceled. Like not literally like you're toots about you, but the point, like, people have very high expectations of how they can be treated, how they should be treated, how they should be spoken to, and so on and so forth. And again, I'm not saying that's bad or good. I'm saying that it just is. And so if you're in a situation like that, I would say, provide your supervisor, your acting supervisor, with as much grace as possible. Try to empathize with them. How they may be, what they may be feeling, how they're going through it. And even I would say, ask the question, hey, is there anything I can do to help? What are your goals? Let's figure out how we can work together to make sure you're successful. Ask that question. Too many people make assumptions about what they believe someone else values or wants or what they're going through. And I think it's important to provide that space. And then second, for your own well-being, remember your locus of control. There's a lot of things that go wrong in our life that we don't have control over. We just don't. And the reality is that us dreading and stressing, the stress can, that impacts your health, not only mental health, but physical health, the stress of all that. If we can remember what we actually have control over and what we don't, then we can say, you know what, that sucks over there, but let me focus on what I can do. All the extra stuff, it's going to happen. Whether I like it or not, these extra stuff is going to happen. What can I focus on to make sure, one, I'm in a good position, but two, I'm always providing value.
That's great. I have one poll question I have to get done, so I'm just going to skip to that for just a moment. If we could pull that up. Yeah. As a manager, are you able to find time to protect yourself from burnout? So yes, I'm able to set boundaries and prioritize self-care, or no, the pressure is constant. So we'll give you a minute to answer that, and then we'll pull up the results. In the interim, though, we have another question. What if someone has a manager in between that drops the story of how great your team is and doesn't share it with executive leadership? So I think the question is basically, you've told your story to a manager about how great you're doing and stuff. The manager never brings that forward, up to a higher level. So what do you do? Anybody want to start?
I would just say, I'll give like three tips in that way. One is to talk to the manager, right? If you notice that it's not sort of going forward, sometimes they don't realize it. You have to understand they're looking at 50 things that they're trying to talk about in a meeting with this senior leadership team, and it may not be the good news story. And so, reminding them to say, hey, in your meeting with the director or with the deputy, can you, highlight this from my team? I would really appreciate it, right? So that's the first step, right? And then the second step is you don't always have to wait for someone else to tell your story. Right? You have the same power that they have to use the tools that they have access to. So if there's a newsletter, guess what? You can still reach out to the Office of Public Affairs and say, hey, I have a newsletter article I'd like for my team, right? And you write it up and you provide the pictures and you make sure it happens. The next step to that too is, there are ways that peers, even if you are a peer or a supervisor, to put people in for awards, which, I believe senior leaders do look at, right? Because they want to see who their top performers are, and that puts them on the stage, puts your team on a stage. So those are 3 ways right there that you can still tell the story without waiting on another person to do it for you.
Those are great points. Ben, Alex, do you have anything?
I would just add that your manager is not the only one that talks up to exec. There's other managers that do that. So if your team is affecting and providing value to them and providing success for them, sharing that with them, right? So that they are getting a win out of it, and they're going to talk about how another team helped them. And then I think Alex earlier talked about, talking to your peers and sharing with them what work you're doing. That trickles up and down and everywhere else. So being vocal, don't sit back and wait for somebody to tell your story or wait for somebody to notice you. Upper management has so many things going on, and often their time is dictated by somebody else, that you have to be an advocate. You have to always be a proponent and pushing to get your story out there. If you're going to sit and wait, you'll sit and wait a long time.
Yeah.
Preach. Both of y'all.
We have another question. How do you build in time to truly manage and mentor your team when priorities are always changing and competing?
Mentor in the moment. That's all I'm going to say to that. I'm going to keep it really short. Mentor in the moment. So you don't need to say, hey, come into my office. Let's talk about it, right? When you see something happen, that's the time to mentor them in the moment. That's the time to coach them in the moment. So that means you have to be present, right? You have to be communicating with your team. You have to be asking about challenges so that you can coach and mentor in the moment. So I'll leave it to Ben and Alex to.
I'll keep mine short too. I would say your budget shows your priorities. Where you spend your money shows your priorities. The same thing goes for your time. If it's important for you to be meeting with your team and doing this, then you should block off the time to make sure you're doing it. Put it on the calendar, make it recurring, that you have time with your staff. The reality is yes, at some point, maybe something pops up that you need to remove that meeting, but at least you have it there, and it's a consistent reminder that you don't delete. And when you got to move it, don't delete it. Find another time, right? You delete it, you're gonna forget it. Move it and find another time. But you, if it's important to you, you have to allocate the time on the front end. Pay yourself first. I could talk on all this finance stuff.
Another question. I like this one. How would you suggest keeping up team morale when you have a very outspoken employee who is very negative about second level leadership?
Real quick, I just say something on this. I think you need to establish what's the organization's values, right? What are the values? What are the norms that are expected? If people are acting and behaving in a way that's not in alignment with the norms and the values of the organization, that's a performance thing.
Yeah.
And you need to have a conversation with that person off to the side to make sure they know this is not appropriate and it won't be dealt with. Sorry to be so harsh, but this is real talk.
Yeah, no, I have nothing contrary to that at all.
The only piece I'd add there is creating an outlet for that individual. In addition to the performance piece, that sometimes there's a reason they're feeling that way, and maybe they've just never been heard, right? But you have to give them a private opportunity for that output, along with you can't do this in front of our team. You can't make these comments publicly. If you need to vent and talk about this, let's talk about it. So I've been on a team where one of the most vocal was amazing producer once somebody actually listened. He had about 15 years that nobody had listened to him, and he was bitter and grumpy. And within a couple of years, just giving him some time and space to share really valuable opinions changed that dynamic. But it is a performance issue. You can't let one person undermine your team, because that is death. That is so bad for your team. You'll lose everybody, and you'll lose your best people. They'll just leave. They'll go somewhere else where they don't have to put up with that person on the team.
Yeah, because negativity is toxic. So
and contagious.
Yes. Yes. We've identified, next question is, we've identified that everyone on the team is burned out. So now what? What are actionable solutions when time crunch is a real issue?
Take a week off.
It's a heavy question.
Just tell everybody, you know what? We're done. I'm joking. Go on, Teresa. You're going to say something.
I think, when you're talking about burnout, right, it doesn't happen overnight. So this is something as a manager you should see coming and have already sort of greased the wheels prior to getting there. So if you're at burnout phase and you're shocked as the manager, that's on you 100%. You're going to hear the grumblings. You're going to see people start taking leave more often. You're going to see people complain more. You're going to see people be negative. That's leading up to burnout. So you have opportunities along the way, right, to sort of fix those things and talk to them about what's ailing them, talk to them about the challenges, talk to them about the future, give them resources. And so you should never get to the point of complete burnout. But if you're there, right, what are the things that you do when you're there, right? So time crunch is always going to be an issue, especially if you're in an environment where work is very, very fast paced, right? Sometimes it doesn't have to be. You just have a manager that creates a chaotic environment. So you have to understand the duality in that, whether the work is really fast paced or if you just have poor leadership, right? So once you understand what that is, because if you just have poor leadership as a manager, you can provide some cover for your folks for a poor leader, right? How you communicate to them, the tone, the feel, the energy that you have when giving new assignments, right? I've worked in a situation where a very toxic manager or senior leader, and then the person who was over me would really just shift the energy from that person to the team. They would say, we got to get it done tomorrow. We got to get it done right now. No, I can't take any questions right now. Start working, right? Instead of saying, that's the chaotic feeling of the senior leader. But me being the manager, I have control over how my team absorbs that information. So I'm going to come to them and say, hey, guys, we got a new tasker up. This is what I think we should do. I want to hear your thoughts on how we can best get it done. Let's take a powwow, 30 minutes just to talk it out. And then we're going to move forward, right? It feels different. It feels like my voice matters. It feels like we're all a part of a team that's going to tackle this issue versus, hey, we got to do this, get it done now. And so as a manager, you have that control to change the energy around how things happen so that people don't feel burned out. But when you're there, again, shift the energy. The actionable solution for that would be, make sure that people are taking their time. You have the ability to say, hey, work-life balance is important. No, I don't want you working till 10 o'clock at night. Log off at 5, right? No, we're not doing any comp time for this project. So I need you guys to be well rested and ready to go the next day, right? So you have control to make sure that they don't burn out by putting boundaries in place and living the values that you say that you have at your organization. And so, really be clear about what you have control over as a manager.
I want to really quick add on to that. Two points. One is, and we're talking about managing up too. As a manager, it's also your job to educate your supervisor, your management, on what the workload is. They may be saying, hey, this is a really important priority. You can say, you know what, you're absolutely right. These are the things we've been working on. We're going to need to shift some time away from this project. This won't be delayed, but we can make sure this happens. Because a lot of times managers, again, they're not thinking. I know when I was younger, I just assumed that people would prioritize things as necessary. And so I would throw out ideas as needed. And people thought they need to do everything. When they just say, if they just say, hey, Alex, don't got time for this one, I would say, okay, cool. This one over here, that's the priority. But you have to feel comfortable having that conversation with your manager to educate them on what everyone's working on. Because you may have the ability to shift priorities. And then I'll say one thing about sometimes what I found a number of times, especially in this remote working environment, this burnout thing happens, and you can tell employees. I love to actually ask my panel about this. You can tell employees, hey, no, we don't want you to work extra hours.
Right.
But you can't control them. So they think they're doing, they're dying on the sword because this is so important. And now they're burning themselves. You keep saying, stop it. And they're working at night. What do you all do in those situations if you got someone who won't listen to you and they keep working?
Oh, I tell them I will write them up. I make it very clear that I don't play about work-life balance. I want you to be your best self because I don't want the disgruntled you. I don't want the burned out you. I don't want that work. That's not quality work, right? That's stressed out. That's poor energy. So no, I will tell them, if I see your light on this computer on after 6 o'clock, you're going to talk to me in the morning. And so they realize like, oh no, Dr. Horn takes this very seriously. I need to go ahead and take my time with my family and recoup and regenerate. And so you have to sometimes put that foot in the sand, not only for the bad things that people do, but for the good things you want them to do.
Preach.
That's wonderful. I love the writing you up. That's great. It's great. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have, Alex. I'm putting this slide up to direct people to some of the things you offer. But I just really want to thank you guys for your comments and being here. I thought it was a great discussion. I also want to thank our 2022 NextGen Partner Alliance for their help putting up today's summit. I do have a few quick reminders. Don't forget to fill out the CPE evaluation form I mentioned earlier to get your credit. You can head over to the exhibit hall to check in the main section of the virtual event and check out the amazing booths, which are filled with lots of information and resources. And then up next are our luncheon keynotes and the awards ceremony at 12:30 Eastern Time. Access that session through going through the conference hall section in the main environment. They're going to be the NextGen Public Service Awards, which are really great. There's some really wonderful winners this year. And then we also, our two keynotes are, I love this title, Your Team Hates You and Here's Why, How You Can Fix It. I think that's got to win an award for best title. And How to Create a Psychologically Safe Team. So thank you so much, and we'll see you at an upcoming session. Thanks, guys.
See everyone. See you, Ms.
Thanks,
Teresa. See you,
everyone.
Ben.
Bye-bye.